You think you know 1970s Black Christmas cooking? Think again. Our families created holiday dishes that carried soul, tradition, and love, recipes that have quietly slipped away from our tables. Let's dig into 2 hours of 60 lost 1970s Christmas dishes Black families made that have disappeared. Tea cakes were the simple sugar cookies that African-American grandmothers baked by the dozens for Christmas, filling tins that would last through the holidays. These weren't fancy decorated cookies. They were soft, round, lightly sweetened with just a hint of nutmeg or vanilla, and perfect for dunking in coffee or milk. The dough came together quickly with butter, sugar, eggs, and flour, rolled and cut with drinking glasses when cookie cutters weren't available. Black families made tea cakes because they were economical, stretching basic pantry staples into enough cookies for everyone who visited during the season. Children would help cut and bake, learning kitchen skills while sneaking warm cookies when grandma's back was turned. The cookies were packed into tins between layers of wax paper, given as gifts to neighbors and church members. Tea cakes represented hospitality and generosity, the understanding that Christmas meant sharing whatever you had with others. Honey taffy used the golden sweetness of local beekeepers instead of refined sugar, creating candy with floral complexity that corn syrup could never match. The honey was cooked with butter until it reached the proper stage, then poured onto marble slabs to cool before pulling began. Like molasses taffy, honey taffy required teamwork and patience. The mixture stretched and folded until it lightened and developed the characteristic chewy texture. The finished candy retained honey's distinctive flavor, each piece tasting of the flowers that bees had visited. Black families in rural areas made honey taffy because honey was often bartered or harvested from wild hives, making it more accessible than store-bought sugar. The candy connected Christmas to the land and seasons, each batch reflecting what local bees had gathered. Children who helped pull honey taffy remembered its particular sweetness, different from any other candy. This taffy represented self-sufficiency and connection to nature's gifts. Ham biscuits made with country ham and soft dinner rolls became handheld sandwiches that children devoured, the salty ham contrasting perfectly with the sweet, buttery rolls that held everything together. Mothers would slice country ham paper thin, the intensely salty, cured meat packed with flavor that needed only small amounts to satisfy, then tuck the slices into soft dinner rolls that had been split and buttered. Some families brushed the tops of the assembled biscuits with melted butter and baked them briefly to warm everything through and create slightly crispy tops. The combination of salty, savory ham with soft, slightly sweet rolls created perfect flavor balance that kept people coming back for more. In 1970s Black households, ham biscuits represented Southern tradition, appetizers that could be prepared ahead and served at room temperature. Children loved ham biscuits because they were familiar comfort food in easy-to-eat form, requiring no plates or utensils and perfect for grabbing. Salmon croquettes appeared on African-American Christmas appetizer platters as elegant bites stretching canned fish festively. Canned salmon was flaked, mixed with breadcrumbs, egg, onion, and seasonings, then shaped into patties and fried golden. The exterior turned crispy while interior stayed moist, each bite delivering salmon richness balanced by seasonings. Families made them small for appetizer portions, knowing guests could eat several without filling up. The preparation was economical. A single can yielded a dozen croquettes when stretched with binders. Children often helped shape patties, learning kitchen skills while contributing to preparations. Served with remoulade or tartar sauce, salmon croquettes felt sophisticated despite humble origins. The tradition connected to times when canned salmon provided affordable protein for families far from coasts. These croquettes proved African-American cooks transformed pantry staples into celebration. Bread pudding with raisins turned leftover bread into a dessert that felt like it belonged on every holiday table. The bread was torn into pieces, soaked in milk, sugar, cinnamon, and eggs, then baked until the top crisped and the center stayed soft and custardy. Raisins swelled inside, turning plump and sweet as they baked. This dish came from the belief that nothing in a good kitchen should ever be wasted, especially during holidays when families were doing their best to stretch what they had. The smell alone wrapped the house in warmth, When served warm with a little vanilla or a drizzle of cream, it tasted like comfort handed down from older generations who knew how to make something luxurious from scraps. Bread pudding was practical, but it was also special, a reminder that love could turn anything into dessert. Fried chicken wings, before they became trendy and expensive, were the discarded parts of chickens that Black families transformed into crispy, flavorful snacks and satisfying meals. The wings were seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and garlic powder, dredged in flour, then fried until golden and crispy in hot oil or lard that made them absolutely delicious. The skin crisped perfectly while the small amount of meat stayed juicy, creating satisfying bites that disappeared quickly from plates at gatherings. These weren't considered premium food in the 1970s, when most people wanted breasts and thighs instead of bony wings nobody else wanted. That meant wings cost almost nothing per pound, sometimes given away free by butchers trying to clear inventory from coolers. Families made huge batches for weekend gatherings, serving them with hot sauce and white bread for perfect combinations. Fried chicken wings represented finding value in what others overlooked, transforming cheap cuts into genuinely delicious food that eventually became so popular they're now expensive. Molasses, stacked cake graced weddings and homecomings with a sweetness born of patience and skill. Thin layers of spiced cake were baked individually, then stacked high with a rich molasses filling that soaked into the crumb as the dessert rested overnight. The dark syrup lent a deep flavor that spoke of both Caribbean cane fields and southern kitchens. Families often baked the layers days ahead, turning the assembly into a festive gathering where aunts and cousins worked side by side. Each slice told a story of celebration and endurance, for molasses was affordable and plentiful even when other sweeteners were scarce. The cake's tall, impressive stature made it a centerpiece on tables decorated for special occasions, a symbol of abundance even in lean times. Today, few households take the time to roll, bake, and stack so many delicate layers, and the recipe lives mostly in old family cookbooks. Those who have tasted it know the quiet triumph of a dessert that rewards effort with lasting memory. In the 1960s, fatback and cabbage was a reminder that flavor did not come from abundance, but from knowing how to cook with care. It was a dish that taught respect for every part of the animal and every leaf from the garden. Pork, fatback, and cabbage turned scraps into sustenance. Vegetable pot pie with biscuit crust was one of the cleverest ways to turn leftovers into a comforting meal. My grandmother gathered whatever vegetables were left from the week, beans, carrots, peas, or turnips, and simmered them in a simple gravy. She poured the mixture into a dish and covered it with biscuit dough instead of pie crust, which baked into a golden, fluffy topping. The result was hearty, filling, and deeply satisfying, stretching scraps into something that felt like a Sunday supper. Each slice carried both thrift and comfort, a reminder that nothing from the kitchen was wasted. The biscuit crust gave the dish substance, making it a true dinner instead of just a side. In the 1960s, vegetable pot pie with biscuit crust was common across homes that relied on ingenuity, turning odds and ends into meals that filled plates and warmed hearts. It was survival, wrapped in comfort, food that told the story of resourceful families making the most of what they had. Peanut brittle was the Christmas candy that African American families made in large batches, filling tins that would be given as gifts and kept for holiday snacking. The process required courage. Cooking sugar to the hard crack stage meant watching temperatures climb past 300 degrees while stirring constantly. Raw peanuts were added at just the right moment, toasting in the hot sugar until golden and fragrant. Baking soda was stirred in quickly, creating the tiny bubbles that made brittle shatter rather than stick to teeth. The mixture was poured onto buttered slabs and spread thin before it hardened. Families learned the hard way that humidity could ruin a batch, making the brittle sticky instead of crisp. Successful batches were broken into jagged pieces and stored in airtight tins. Peanut brittle was often the last candy made before Christmas because it required dry weather and full attention. This candy was science and tradition combined, a sweet reminder that the best treats demanded respect. Coconut patties brought tropical sweetness to Southern Black Christmas tables, the shredded coconut bound with sugar syrup into rounds that could be dipped in chocolate or left plain. The candy required simmering coconut with sugar and milk until the mixture thickened enough to hold its shape when dropped onto waxed paper. Some families added vanilla or almond extract. Others kept the flavor pure, letting the coconut speak for itself. The patties were sometimes tinted pink or green for holiday color, food coloring stirred into the mixture before shaping. After cooling, many were dipped halfway in melted chocolate, creating two-toned treats that looked professional enough for gift-giving. Coconut patties appeared on platters alongside other homemade candies, their tropical flavor a contrast to the molasses and nut-based confections that dominated Southern candy making. The recipe traveled through Black communities as women shared techniques at church gatherings, each family adding small variations that made their version distinct. Miniature cornbread muffins with honey butter were golden gems that children popped into their mouths whole, the crumbly cornbread texture melting while sweet honey butter added richness. Mothers would prepare cornbread batter using stone-ground cornmeal, flour, eggs, buttermilk, and just enough sugar to balance the corn's natural earthiness, then spoon it into mini muffin tins that baked quickly. The muffins emerged from ovens with crispy, slightly caramelized tops and tender, crumbly interiors that begged to be broken open and slathered with butter. Honey butter was made by whipping softened butter with honey until fluffy and smooth, creating a spread that melted instantly when slathered on hot muffins. In the 1970s, Black households, these miniature cornbread muffins represented Southern hospitality in bite-sized form. Children loved them because they were individually portioned, making them feel like special treats rather than ordinary bread, and the sweet honey butter made every bite feel indulgent and special. Pickled eggs appeared in glass jars on African American Christmas tables, their purple-tinted whites signaling the beet brine that transformed them. Hard-boiled eggs were submerged in spiced vinegar colored with beet juice, bay leaves, and peppercorns, then left to cure for days until pickling penetrated completely. The eggs emerged tangy and firm, with beet brine adding earthiness and striking color that made platters festive. Families prepared them weeks in advance, knowing flavor improved with time and jars could be stored without refrigeration. The tradition connected to preservation techniques sustaining communities before electricity reached rural homes. Sliced in half and arranged on platters, pickled eggs added protein and visual interest to appetizer spreads. Children were fascinated by the colors, often eating them just to see pink penetration through whites. The eggs represented thrift and planning, with families transforming cheap ingredients into conversation pieces guests remembered long after holidays ended. Buttermilk pie was one of those desserts that proved a holiday table did not need anything complicated to feel complete. It was made from the humblest ingredients, the kind families always had on hand. Buttermilk, sugar, eggs, butter, and a little flour to hold everything together. Somehow, those few things transformed into a custard pie that tasted far richer than the recipe suggested. The filling baked into a silky center with a golden top that cracked just slightly when you cut into it. The kind of crackle that let you know the texture underneath was going to be perfect. Grandmothers made this pie with a calm confidence, whisking everything together in one bowl like they were stirring up memories instead of batter. Kids hovered nearby waiting for the bowl, while adults tried to pretend they were not watching the oven as the house filled with that warm, sweet smell. Buttermilk pie tasted like softness, like reassurance, like the kind of dessert that wrapped itself around you rather than demanding attention. It was a holiday staple not because it was fancy, but because it was reliable, comforting, and always welcome, no matter how many desserts were already on the table. When slices were served after big family meals, they were eaten slowly, with quiet moments of appreciation that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with tradition. And long after the holidays ended, people remembered this pie for exactly what it was: a simple dessert that somehow made the season feel complete. Fried chicken gizzards turned organ meat into crispy, chewy bites that cost almost nothing per pound, but satisfied like expensive steaks never could. The gizzards were thoroughly cleaned, boiled until tender, then dredged in seasoned flour mixed with paprika, garlic powder, cayenne, and black pepper, before being deep-fried until golden brown. The result was crunchy outside with firm, meaty texture inside that delivered protein and iron while costing fractions of what chicken breasts cost at any market. Street vendors sold them in paper bags at fish shacks and corner stores throughout Black neighborhoods during weekends and celebrations. Families made them at home for weekend gatherings, serving them with hot sauce and saltine crackers for perfect combination. In the 1970s, gizzards cost less than 50 cents per pound, making them accessible protein for families on impossibly tight budgets. Fried gizzards represented refusal to waste any part of the chicken, transforming organs into genuinely delicious food people actively craved. Field pea salad with hot pepper vinegar offered a cool bite for the hottest southern evenings. Tender field peas were boiled until just soft, then chilled and tossed with diced onions, sweet peppers, and a splash of sharp vinegar infused with fiery peppers. The salad balanced earthy legumes with a bright tang that woke the palate after long days in the sun. Served on wide porches as cicadas sang, it accompanied fried chicken, grilled fish, or simply a hunk of cornbread. Home gardeners prized field peas for their reliability in poor soil, and the vinegar peppers were often homemade, steeped for weeks in glass bottles on sunny windowsills. Guests at summer suppers remembered the sting of the vinegar and the gentle sweetness of the peas as the taste of true Southern hospitality. Today, packaged beans and bottled dressings have replaced the careful soaking and seasoning that once defined the dish, but the memory of its crisp, refreshing bite lingers in kitchens where tradition still holds strong. Butter beans and rice were another cheap but comforting meal that carried families through lean times. Butter beans, with their creamy texture, were slow cooked until tender, often flavored with a smoked ham hock or bone if one was available. The smoky taste infused the beans and created a rich broth that poured beautifully over rice. My grandmother used long-grain rice that stretched a pot of beans into enough servings for the whole household. The dish was hearty, filling, and nourishing, feeding both body and spirit. Butter beans were inexpensive compared to meat, yet they carried enough protein to keep families going strong. Children learned to appreciate the soft beans and flavorful broth as part of everyday meals, and adults recognized their value in stretching budgets. It was not a dish of extravagance but of practicality, a dinner that turned cheap staples into something people looked forward to. Butter beans and rice told the story of resilience in kitchens where every penny counted and every plate needed to satisfy. Fried green tomato. Po' boys turned unripe tomatoes into a sandwich that tasted like pure coastal sunshine wrapped in crunchy cornmeal. Thick slices of firm green tomatoes were dredged in seasoned cornmeal and fried until their edges crisped and their centers softened just enough to release a bright tang. Piled high on soft French bread with a smear of remoulade and a handful of shredded lettuce, they became a favorite along Gulf Coast streets where shrimp boats docked and music floated from open windows. Vendors often sold them at fish fries and fairs when seafood prices climbed too high, proving that a garden vegetable could carry the day as well as any oyster or crab. Families remembered the scent of hot oil and the pop of cornmeal batter while waiting in line for a sandwich that blended thrift and celebration. Today, fast food counters try to imitate the flavor, but they cannot capture the quiet magic of fresh garden tomatoes picked before ripening, fried in backyard kitchens, and shared among neighbors who knew the value of every bite. Hopping John, served at midnight on New Year's Eve, embodied hope and superstition blended with practical economics, as black-eyed peas, rice, and pork came together in tradition-laden celebrations. The peas were cooked with rice, smoked pork, onions, and peppers until everything melded into one unified dish with layers of texture and deep flavor. This wasn't just food, but ritual, with families believing that eating Hopping John at the year's start ensured prosperity throughout coming months ahead. The tradition likely originated with enslaved Africans who combined West African rice cooking techniques with ingredients available on plantations for survival and celebration. In the 1970s, the dish remained affordable because black-eyed peas and rice were among the cheapest staples available in any store. Families made enormous pots, knowing that leftovers meant extended good luck rather than waste that would bring bad fortune. Hopping, John represented cultural continuity, African heritage meeting American survival, creating something uniquely Black American that sustained both bodies and spirits. Vanilla wafer banana pudding was the quiet masterpiece that families prepared the night before because everyone knew it tasted better after waiting. Grandma layered those vanilla wafers, bananas, and pudding like she was building a story, one chapter at a time. She always used a glass dish so you could see each layer, each memory stacked on top of the last. The wafers softened overnight, turning from crisp cookies into tender bites that tasted like childhood. The bananas darkened just a little, sweetening as they settled into the custard, and the pudding, creamy, cool, and smooth, brought everything together the way elders often did, without saying much. Banana pudding was the dessert you could count on to show up at Christmas, Easter, church dinners, or any gathering where family needed a reminder of who they were. In the 70s, when days were long and work was heavy, this pudding waited in the refrigerator like a promise of comfort after whatever the world had taken that week. Kids scraped the sides of the pan, adults got the first big scoop, and no one complained because everyone got exactly what they wanted. It was simple, humble, and unforgettable. A dessert of patience, time, and tenderness. Fried pork skins crackled in cast-iron skillets during African-American Christmas preparations, transforming pigskin into crispy snacks. The skins were cleaned, scraped, and dried before being fried twice, first to render fat, then at high heat to puff. The result was light, crunchy, and deeply porky, seasoned with salt or cayenne and garlic. Families served them warm in bowls, watching guests grab handfuls before main celebrations. The preparation connected to hog-killing traditions when nothing was wasted and every part had purpose. Children loved the crunch and saltiness, while adults appreciated how skins paired with cold drinks. Making pork skins required skill. Temperature had to be exact or they'd burn. The tradition represented African-American mastery of transforming humble ingredients into something people craved. Fried pork skins reminded everyone that celebration didn't require expensive ingredients. Smoked oysters on crackers with hot sauce were adventurous bites that curious children tried. The smoky, briny oysters creating complex flavors that divided people into lovers and haters with no middle ground. Fathers would open tins of smoked oysters packed in oil, arranging them on serving platters surrounded by crackers and providing small bottles of hot sauce for those who wanted extra heat. The oysters had a strong, distinctive flavor, smoky from the curing process and intensely oceanic. Each oyster was placed on a cracker, sometimes with a tiny drop of hot sauce, creating bite-sized portions that delivered maximum flavor. In 1970s, Black households smoked oysters represented coastal sophistication and culinary bravery, appetizers that showed guests the host was willing to serve bold, distinctive foods. Children who tried smoked oysters either loved them immediately or swore them off forever, the strong flavor creating lasting memories. Seafoam candy was divinity's delicate cousin, lighter and more fragile, dissolving almost before the tongue could register its sweetness. Brown sugar replaced white in the syrup, creating a candy with caramel undertones that made it richer than its pure white relative. The process was identical. Syrup poured into beaten egg whites, whipped until the mixture held shape, but the result looked like clouds at sunset, pale tan and pillowy. Black grandmothers made seafoam for Christmas because it offered variety on candy platters dominated by dark fudges and brittles. The candy was impossibly light, each piece weighing almost nothing yet delivering concentrated sweetness. Children loved seafoam for its melt-away texture, while adults appreciated its sophisticated flavor. Like divinity, seafoam demanded dry weather and proper technique, refusing to set properly when humidity crept too high. The candy represented refinement when traditional skills met variations on familiar themes. Syllabub was the elegant Christmas drink dessert that African-American families served in their finest glasses when company came calling during the holidays. This frothy mixture of cream, sugar, wine, or sherry, and lemon juice was whipped until it held soft peaks, then spooned into cups where it slowly separated into cream on top and sweet liquid below. The name sounded fancy and the presentation impressed, but the recipe was simple enough for any cook to master. Black families learned syllabub from plantation kitchens and made it their own, sometimes substituting homemade wine or adding nutmeg for warmth. Guests would eat the cream with spoons, then drink the sweet wine that pooled beneath. 2 desserts in one. Syllabub required no baking, no special equipment, just good cream and patience with the whipping. It represented the kind of old-fashioned elegance that Christmas once demanded, a reminder that celebration meant elevating everyday ingredients into something worth savoring slowly. Cheese straws made from sharp cheddar and cayenne pepper were crispy, addictive sticks that disappeared from serving bowls almost as quickly as they were refilled, their orange-gold color and spicy kick making them irresistible. Grandmothers would grate blocks of sharp cheddar by hand, mixing it with softened butter, flour, cayenne pepper, and salt until the dough came together, then pressing it through cookie presses or rolling it into long ropes before slicing. The cheese straws baked until crispy and slightly browned at the edges, filling kitchens with the sharp, tangy aroma of melting cheese mixed with subtle heat. Once cooled, they were stored in tins, maintaining crispness for days. In 1970s, Black households, cheese straws represented Southern tradition, recipes passed down through generations with each family adding their signature touch, extra cayenne, paprika, or pecans. Horehound candy carried medicinal memories into Christmas traditions. The bitter herb transformed into drops that old folks remembered from their grandparents' kitchens. Horehound tea was brewed strong, then sugar was added, and the mixture boiled until it reached hard crack stage. Poured onto greased slabs and scored before cooling completely, the candy was broken into pieces that looked like amber glass. The flavor was intensely herbal, an acquired taste that younger generations often rejected but elders craved. Black families made horehound candy because the herb grew wild and the candy soothed winter coughs while satisfying sweet cravings. The drops appeared in jars on mantles and side tables, available for anyone needing comfort. Horehound candy connected generations, each batch carrying memories of grandmothers who believed in the healing power of bitter herbs transformed into something approaching sweet. Stuffed celery brought elegance and crunch to African-American Christmas appetizer spreads, with crisp stalks serving as vessels for savory fillings. The classic filling combined cream cheese with chopped olives, pimentos, and sometimes blue cheese, piped into the celery's natural groove. Other variations used pimento cheese, deviled ham spread, or seasoned cream cheese with chives. The preparation was simple enough for children to help, making it a family activity during holiday cooking. Celery was affordable and available even in winter, while fillings stretched expensive ingredients across many servings. Arranged on platters with stuffed sides facing up, they created colorful rows looking far fancier than their modest cost. Ladies' auxiliaries featured stuffed celery at every gathering, with cooks varying fillings to showcase creativity. The appetizer satisfied those wanting something light, providing crunch and freshness, balancing heavy fare. Stuffed celery represented the gift for making simple ingredients feel celebratory. Gelatin mold desserts were the colorful crown jewels of holiday tables from the 60s to the 80s, the kind of dishes that made children stare and elders smile proudly. These molds came in every shape imaginable, from rings and wreaths to towers that wiggled with every step you took while carrying them. Families used canned fruit, lemon gelatin, lime gelatin, cottage cheese, and sometimes even whipped topping to create layers that looked like stained glass when sliced. The bright colors made them feel festive, and the playful jiggling made them unforgettable. Grandmothers unmolded them with a dramatic pause, tapping the pan just so until the whole creation slid out perfectly, shining like a holiday decoration you could eat. Some versions were sweet and fruity, others creamy and cool, and each family had their own combination they refused to change. Gelatin molds were about presentation as much as flavor. They were the dessert that made people say, "Ooh," before they even picked up a spoon. And even though many modern households have left them behind, for decades, these shimmering creations were a symbol of hospitality, celebration, and the joy of putting something beautiful on the table during the holidays. Black-eyed peas with rice appeared on New Year's Day tables without fail, carrying promises of prosperity and good fortune into every household that honored the sacred tradition. The peas were simmered with ham hocks or salt pork until tender, seasoned with onions, garlic, and pepper, then served over white rice for complete protein. This combination wasn't just cultural tradition, but also nutritional brilliance, providing everything bodies needed from simple, affordable ingredients combined thoughtfully. The dish was believed to bring luck because peas represented coins and greens served alongside represented paper money flowing in. Families made huge pots, knowing leftovers meant continued good fortune throughout the year ahead for everyone who ate them. In the 1970s, black-eyed peas cost pennies per pound dried, making this luck-bringing tradition accessible to even the poorest families struggling through hard times. Black-eyed peas with rice represented hope, faith, and belief that following traditions would bring better times ahead, making them psychologically important beyond nutrition. Stewed oxtails with rice gravy brought deep flavor and slow-cooked richness to Sunday tables across many African American communities. Oxtails, once inexpensive and overlooked, were browned in heavy pots and then simmered for hours with onions, garlic, and spices until the meat turned buttery soft. The braising liquid thickened into a silky gravy that clung to each grain of rice, creating a dish that was equal parts comfort and celebration. Families saved this meal for weekends when everyone could gather because patience was essential and conversation flowed while the pot worked its magic. Children sneaked tastes from wooden spoons, drawn by the savory aroma that filled the house from morning until evening. The humble tale, once discarded by butchers, became a centerpiece of pride and ingenuity. Today, rising prices and faster cooking habits mean fewer people take the time to coax such tenderness from a simple cut of beef, but those who remember the meal speak of it as a perfect union of thrift, skill, and the slow rhythm of family life. Boiled turnips with cornbread crumbs was another way families stretched cheap vegetables into full meals. Turnips were easy to grow and often given away, their strong flavor softened by boiling them until tender. My grandmother ladled the hot turnips into bowls and topped them with crumbled cornbread, the bread soaking up the broth until it became hearty enough for supper. It was plain food, yes, but it kept stomachs full on nights when meat was scarce. The bitterness of the turnips mellowed with time and seasoning, and the cornbread gave every bite body and comfort. Children might have grumbled, but they ate their fill because there was no room for waste. In the 1960s, this dish was common across kitchens that relied on ingenuity to make ends meet. It was a simple combination, yet it carried dignity because it represented survival. Boiled turnips with cornbread crumbs may not have been fancy, but it held families together through lean times. Caramel cake was the crown of African American Christmas tables, a dessert so revered that only the most skilled baker in the family dared attempt it. The cake layers were simple: butter, sugar, eggs, flour, and buttermilk. But the caramel icing was where reputations were made or broken. Real caramel icing required cooking sugar until it turned amber, then carefully adding butter and cream while stirring constantly to prevent burning or seizing. The process could take an hour of standing over a hot stove, watching the mixture transform from grainy to glossy. If the caramel was pulled too soon, it would slide off the cake. Too late, and it would harden into candy before spreading. Black grandmothers knew the exact color, the perfect drip from the spoon, the moment when everything came together. The finished cake wore thick waves of mahogany icing that cracked slightly when sliced. Caramel cake was Christmas morning, Christmas dinner, and Boxing Day breakfast combined into one magnificent dessert. Sugared pecans appeared at every Black Christmas gathering, the nuts coated in cinnamon-spiced sugar that crackled and melted on the tongue. Egg whites whisked until foamy provided the glue, coating pecans before they were tossed in sugar mixed with cinnamon, nutmeg, and a pinch of salt. Spread on baking sheets and roasted slowly, the nuts emerged fragrant and crystallized, each one wearing a sweet shell that transformed ordinary pecans into candy. The process was forgiving, making sugared pecans the candy that beginners could master without fear of failure. Children helped stir nuts in sugar, their small hands learning the rhythms of holiday candy making through simple tasks. Tins of sugared pecans traveled to church gatherings and neighbor visits, the candy acceptable for any occasion from afternoon coffee to midnight snacking. Sugared pecans represented accessibility, the candy that anyone could make regardless of skill or experience, yet still tasted impressive enough to gift with pride. Chicken salad stuffed in cherry tomatoes created colorful, bite-sized portions that children eagerly grabbed. The cool, creamy chicken salad contrasting with the fresh, slightly tart tomato cups that held everything together. Aunties would hollow out cherry tomatoes using small spoons or melon ballers, creating little edible bowls that were functional and beautiful when arranged on serving platters. The chicken salad was made from finely chopped cooked chicken mixed with mayonnaise, diced celery, sweet pickle relish, and seasonings. The mixture kept cold until serving time. Each hollowed tomato was filled with a generous spoonful of chicken salad, mounded slightly on top for visual appeal. In 1970s Black households, these stuffed tomatoes represented creativity and presentation, transforming simple ingredients into appetizers that looked impressive enough for special occasions. Children loved them because they were perfectly portioned, colorful, and combined familiar flavors in a fun format. Pepper jelly and cream cheese balanced sweet heat against cool creaminess, becoming a fixture on African-American Christmas tables by mid-century. Homemade pepper jelly used hot peppers from summer gardens, preserved with sugar and vinegar until transformed into jewel-colored spreads glowing when held to light. A block of cream cheese served as foundation, jelly spooned generously over top, crackers provided for spreading. The combination worked because cream cheese tempered pepper heat while jelly's sweetness enhanced complex flavors. Families took pride in jelly-making skills, adjusting pepper varieties for signature heat levels. Some added bell peppers for color, others used habaneros for serious spice. The appetizer required no last-minute preparation, ideal for hosts juggling multiple dishes. Church gatherings featured several versions, guests comparing heat levels and declaring favorites. The tradition represented how African-American cooks elevated simple ingredients through preservation techniques from generations past. Pecan sandies made from scratch were the melt-in-your-mouth cookies that older women loved gifting to neighbors, teachers, and church friends during the holidays. They were crumbly, buttery, and full of toasted pecans, the kind of cookie that dissolved on your tongue before you even had time to savor it properly. The dough was simple, but the flavor tasted expensive, especially in decades when pecans were considered a treat. Families roasted the nuts carefully, letting their rich aroma fill the kitchen before folding them into the dough. When the cookies baked, the whole house smelled warm and nutty in a way that felt instantly festive. These sandies were wrapped in wax paper, tucked into old tins, and delivered with pride. They were a holiday tradition rooted in generosity, hospitality, and the belief that good food should always be shared. People waited all year for them. Oxtail stew transformed the tail of cattle into fall-off-the-bone tender meat swimming in rich, gelatinous gravy that coated everything perfectly when served over white rice. The oxtails were browned first to develop deep flavor, then slowly braised with onions, carrots, celery, tomatoes, and red wine or broth for hours until the meat became incredibly tender and rich. The bones released collagen and marrow, thickening the sauce naturally and creating richness that couldn't be achieved any other way with cheaper ingredients. This wasn't quick food, but patient food, requiring hours of low heat to transform tough connective tissue into silky texture worth waiting for. Families served this on special occasions despite the humble ingredient because the preparation demanded time and attention that showed love clearly. In the 1970s, oxtails were considered throwaway cuts that butchers sold cheaply, perfect for Black families who understood their potential for transformation into something special. The dish represented culinary alchemy, showing how time, technique, and patience could transform the least desirable cuts. Wild muscadine grape jam brought the late summer woods to the breakfast table in a deep purple shine. Children and parents walked along fence lines and wooded edges with baskets in hand, searching for the thick-skinned grapes that thrived in southern heat. Once gathered, the fruit was boiled gently until the skins burst, and the pulp softened, filling kitchens with a fragrance that hinted at honey and earth. The juice was strained and mixed with sugar, then cooked again until it thickened into a jam rich enough to spread over biscuits or stir into morning porridge. Families prized each jar, knowing that muscadines grew wild and free, needing only careful hands and patience to become something sweet. In some towns, church groups organized picking days, turning the harvest into a social event where songs and laughter echoed through the vines. Today, supermarket grapes have replaced the wild hunt, and store-bought jams lack the musky depth of fruit ripened under southern sun. But memories of purple-stained fingers still linger in many hearts. Fried green tomatoes with grits was a cheap southern classic that carried both tradition and thrift in every bite. Unripe tomatoes, plucked before they spoiled, were sliced, dredged in cornmeal, and fried until golden in a skillet of hot oil or bacon fat. My grandmother paired them with bowls of creamy grits, the cornmeal base that stretched across countless households for pennies. The tomatoes were tangy and crisp, the grits soft and warm, creating a contrast that satisfied both hunger and taste. It was food that came straight from the garden and pantry, without needing costly additions. Families ate it often in the summer when tomatoes grew in abundance, but it found its way to the table year-round. The combination of fried green tomatoes with grits represented resilience, resourcefulness, and the comfort of tradition. In the 1960s, this meal stood as proof that good food did not depend on wealth, but on knowing how to use what you had wisely. Fried chicken livers with hot sauce delivered iron-rich organ meat in forms that even children would eat, especially when coated in seasoned flour and fried crispy golden brown. The livers were soaked in buttermilk to remove any bitterness, dredged in flour mixed with paprika, garlic powder, and cayenne, then fried quickly in hot oil until perfectly cooked. The result was crispy outside with creamy, almost mousse-like interior that melted in the mouth when cooked properly without overcooking into grainy texture. These provided concentrated nutrition, including iron, B vitamins, and protein in affordable packages costing less than $1 per pound at markets. Families served them as main dishes or snacks, with hot sauce being mandatory for many who loved the spicy, rich combination that made them addictive. In the 1970s, chicken livers were considered poor people's food that wealthier families avoided completely, meaning they stayed affordable and accessible for struggling families. Fried chicken livers represented nutritional wisdom disguised as soul food, proving that the cheapest cuts often delivered the most essential nutrients. Mustard greens with smoked turkey necks carried the flavor of endurance from one generation to the next. During the Great Depression and later years when ham hocks became expensive or scarce, cooks turned to the neck bones of smoked turkey for the same rich depth. The greens simmered slowly in seasoned broth until tender, soaking up the smoky essence of the meat and the spice of crushed red pepper. Families gathered around the pot to breathe in the savory aroma while cornbread baked in the oven. This dish offered nourishment and warmth, proof that ingenuity could turn modest ingredients into a feast. Children learned to wash and tear the greens while elders seasoned by taste alone, passing down a craft more than a recipe. Today, pre-washed greens and quick cooking methods have dulled the ritual, but the memory of long simmering pots and the steady comfort of smoked turkey necks remains a powerful reminder of resilience and shared meals. Pickled watermelon rind appeared in cut glass dishes at African American Christmas gatherings, its translucent sweetness offering contrast to savory appetizers. The preparation began during summer watermelon season, when white rind was trimmed, cubed, and preserved in spiced syrup with cinnamon, cloves, and vinegar. Pickling transformed tough rind into something tender and complex, sweet, tangy, and warmly spiced in ways surprising first-time tasters. Families stored jars in pantries for months, saving them for holiday tables where they added elegance and conversation. The tradition represented African American commitment to waste nothing, finding value in parts others discarded. Children often approached with curiosity, discovering flavors unlike anything else on the table. The pickles required patience and planning, connecting summer abundance to winter celebration through preservation arts passed through generations. Pickled watermelon rind proved that the best holiday foods came from creativity rather than expense. Ambrosia with marshmallows and citrus was the bright, festive bowl that lit up holiday tables even before anyone picked up a spoon. It was a Southern tradition carried into African American homes with pride, mixing oranges, pineapple, coconut, and soft marshmallows into a dish that tasted like sunshine breaking through winter clouds. Some families added cherries for color, some added pecans for crunch, and some kept it simple, letting the fruit and cream speak for themselves. This was the dessert brought out when plates were heavy with savory food and people needed something light to lift the meal. The first spoonful always tasted refreshing, cool, and nostalgic all at once, carrying the memory of church potlucks and Sunday dinners into the holidays. Grandmothers made it the night before so the flavors could blend, checking the bowl in the refrigerator like it was a secret too special to open too early. When it finally reached the table, it drew smiles from anyone who grew up with it because ambrosia was never just fruit. It was a reminder of family history, of thrift, of turning simple ingredients into something joyful, and for many households, no holiday felt complete without it. Crystallized violets were the fancy candy that Black grandmothers made when they wanted something truly special. Delicate flowers transformed into edible jewels that sparkled on holiday tables. Fresh violets were painted carefully with beaten egg white, then dusted with fine sugar and dried until the coating hardened into a protective shell. The process required patience and gentle hands. Too much pressure crushed the petals. Too little left gaps in the sugar coating. The finished flowers looked almost too beautiful to eat, their purple color preserved beneath sparkling crystals. Black families made crystallized violets because spring flowers could be preserved for months through this technique. The candy appeared on top of cakes or arranged on platters as decoration and treat combined. Violets carried subtle floral sweetness, their flavor delicate compared to bold molasses confections. Pickled shrimp marinated in vinegar, oil, and spices created tangy, flavorful bites that adventurous children tried. The cold, tender shrimp infused with herbs and aromatics that made them taste complex. Aunties would boil shrimp until just cooked, then peel them and place them in jars or bowls where they were covered with a marinade of vinegar, oil, sliced onions, bay leaves, peppercorns, and sometimes lemon slices. The shrimp marinated for at least 24 hours, absorbing the tangy, aromatic flavors and developing a pickled taste that was both refreshing and sophisticated. The marinated shrimp were served cold with toothpicks for easy serving, the onions and bay leaves removed or left in depending on family preference. In Black households during the 1970s, pickled shrimp represented make-ahead convenience, appetizers that actually improved with time. Children who tried pickled shrimp discovered seafood could be tangy and bright. Pecan pie was the Christmas dessert that showcased the South's most treasured nut in all its buttery, caramelized glory across African American holiday tables. The filling was simple: eggs, sugar, corn syrup, butter, and vanilla poured over a layer of pecan halves that rose during baking, creating a mosaic of golden nuts suspended in amber sweetness. Black families often gathered pecans themselves from trees in yards and along roadsides, cracking them by hand during the weeks before Christmas. The pie baked until the filling set but still jiggled slightly, promising that perfect balance between firm and gooey. Some families added bourbon or chocolate, but traditionalists insisted the pecans needed nothing more than that caramel-like filling to shine. Pecan pie was served at room temperature, often with fresh whipped cream, though many preferred it unadorned. The pie represented abundance, the gift of Southern trees transformed into something worth celebrating. It was the dessert that said Christmas had truly arrived. Rock candy grew slowly on strings suspended in sugar syrup, the crystals forming over days into geological wonders that fascinated children. The process required patience that tested young minds. Supersaturated sugar solution poured into jars, strings dangled from pencils laid across the openings, then waiting while crystals slowly accumulated. Black families made rock candy because it taught children about patience and science while producing treats that cost almost nothing. The crystals could be tinted with food coloring, creating red, green, or blue formations that looked like precious gems. After a week or more, the strings were lifted, revealing sugar formations that crackled when bitten. Rock candy wasn't fancy, but it was magical, watching sugar transform from liquid to solid, from dissolved to crystallized. Children remembered making rock candy long after the taste faded, the process mattering more than the product. This candy represented learning disguised as treat-making. Cocktail meatballs simmered in grape jelly and chili sauce created sweet, savory bites that children couldn't resist, the glossy sauce coating each meatball like candy while delivering unexpected flavors. Mothers would brown frozen meatballs in skillets before transferring them to slow cookers or pots where they simmered in a mixture of grape jelly and bottled chili sauce that melted together into a thick, shiny glaze. The combination sounded strange but tasted magical, the grape jelly's sweetness balancing the chili sauce's tang and creating a flavor profile that kept people reaching for more. As the meatballs simmered, they absorbed the sauce and became tender, the exterior developing a sticky coating that made them perfect for spearing with toothpicks. In Black households during the 1970s, these cocktail meatballs represented easy elegance, a recipe that seemed fancy but required minimal effort. Children loved them because they were bite-sized, required no cutting, and tasted like a sweet, savory treat. Deviled crab brought coastal luxury to African-American Christmas celebrations, with seasoned crab meat packed into shells and baked until golden. Fresh crab was picked clean, then mixed with breadcrumbs, mayonnaise, mustard, and enough cayenne to justify the deviled name. The mixture was spooned back into cleaned shells, topped with breadcrumbs and butter, then baked until tops turned crispy brown. Families near the Chesapeake, Gulf Coast, or Carolina shores gathered their own crabs, making this elegant appetizer practically free. The preparation required patience, picking crab took time, and filling needed careful seasoning to enhance rather than mask sweet crab flavor. Church suppers featured deviled crab as special occasion food, with cooks earning reputations based on signature recipes. Children learned to crack and pick crabs alongside elders, education connecting them to coastal heritage. Deviled crab proved that African-American cooks transformed regional abundance into celebration worthy of finest gatherings. Chocolate chess pie was the dessert families reserved for nights when the occasion called for something rich and silky enough to make people lean back in their chairs. The filling was made from cocoa, butter, sugar, and eggs, mixed until it became a glossy, chocolatey custard. When it baked, it formed that thin, crackled top that let you know everything underneath was going to be smooth as velvet. One slice was enough to make anyone quiet for a moment. It was perfect for holidays, for celebrations, for late nights when family did not want the evening to end. Chocolate chess pie was a reminder that luxury did not require money, just skill and patience. And it never mattered whether the pie was served on fancy plates or paper ones, because the first bite always stole the attention in the room. Families guarded the recipe like treasure, passing it on only when someone proved they could respect its history. That pie represented pride, tradition, and the belief that simple ingredients could still create something unforgettable. Butter beans with ham hocks stretched single pieces of smoked pork into meals feeding entire families for 2 days with minimal additional ingredients. Large dried lima beans were soaked overnight, then simmered for hours with ham hocks, onions, garlic, and black pepper until creamy and rich throughout. The ham hocks released their smoky flavor and gelatinous richness into the cooking liquid, creating thick, savory broth that coated each bean perfectly every time. This combination provided protein from both beans and meat, making it nutritionally complete even though ham hocks were among the cheapest cuts available anywhere. The beans were served over rice or with cornbread, with the potlikker considered precious enough to sip from bowls like soup. In the 1970s, dried beans were pantry staples lasting months and costing less than $1 per pound for family supplies. A single ham hock could flavor an entire pot of beans, making the meat-to-meal ratio incredibly economical for struggling families. Pickled watermelon rind turned summer scraps into something bright and memorable when waste was never an option. Families peeled the green rinds from sweet watermelons, cut them into strips, and simmered them in a brine of vinegar, sugar, and warm spices until the pieces turned translucent and tender. The finished pickles carried a gentle sweetness with a tart kick that balanced fried fish or smoky barbecued pork. Children often helped pack the jars, laughing as the kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and clove. These jars lined pantry shelves and cooled in cellars, ready to brighten winter meals with a taste of summer. For many households, this thrifty condiment was a sign of careful planning and pride in making every harvest last. Today, few people bother to save the rinds, and the recipe hides in old notebooks and fading memories. Yet those who remember speak of the surprising pleasure of that sweet, sour crunch beside a plate of fried catfish. Stewed okra with cornmeal dumplings was a dish that blended frugality with comfort in a way that stuck with families for decades. Okra, often grown in backyard gardens, went into a simmering pot with onions, tomatoes, and broth until it softened into a thick stew. My grandmother would mix simple cornmeal batter, drop spoonfuls into the bubbling pot, and let the dumplings cook until they puffed into tender bites. The texture of the okra thickened the stew naturally, giving it body without needing flour or cream. Each bowl carried the flavor of the garden, earthy and sustaining, with dumplings that filled the stomachs of tired workers. It was food that came straight from the soil and stretched further than its ingredients suggested. Children grew up eating this dish as a matter of routine, yet it became part of the rhythm of survival. In the 1960s, stewed okra with cornmeal dumplings was a staple that represented both thrift and ingenuity, turning humble vegetables and flour into something worthy of pride at the dinner table. Red rice with sausage brought Gullah traditions into urban black kitchens, creating one-pot meals that combined African cooking techniques with American ingredients in uniquely flavorful and satisfying ways. Long grain rice was cooked with smoked sausage, tomatoes, onions, peppers, and spices until the rice absorbed all the liquid and turned deep red throughout. The dish was savory, slightly spicy, and deeply satisfying, with each grain of rice coated in tomato richness and sausage fat for maximum flavor. This wasn't just food, but cultural heritage, connecting coastal African Americans to West African jollof rice through centuries of adaptation and survival across oceans. Families served this at celebrations, church dinners, and regular weeknight meals when rice and sausage were all the budget allowed for feeding everyone. In the 1970s, rice was among the cheapest starches available, and smoked sausage provided maximum flavor from minimal meat for economical cooking. Red rice with sausage represented cultural continuity and African heritage, surviving through food traditions that connected past to present. Cornbread dressing dessert bites were the unintentional treats that only the cooks truly understood, created when the edges of the pan caramelized just enough to turn savory into sweet. After the big holiday meal, when everyone else was full and settling into their chairs, the ones who stayed in the kitchen knew those golden edges were the best part. Crisp, browned, slightly sweetened by the butter and aromatics baked into the cornbread itself. Those corner bites tasted like a reward for the people who had prepared the feast. Kids wandered in hoping to sneak one, and elders pretended not to see them take it. These edges were never meant to be dessert, but they always ended up tasting like one, especially when someone drizzled a little leftover cranberry sauce across the top. In 70s households, where nothing went to waste, those sweetened leftover edges became a quiet tradition, shared standing up, talking softly, enjoying one last bite before the evening settled into its slower pace. Cornbread dressing dessert bites were simple, accidental, and unforgettable, the kind of treat only families inside the kitchen ever got to experience fully. Fried chicken wings served as Christmas appetizers long before buffalo sauce made them famous, appearing on African-American tables seasoned with salt, pepper, and cayenne. Wings were considered less desirable cuts, making them affordable for families who reserved breast meat for main courses. The preparation was straightforward. Wings dredged in seasoned flour and fried in cast iron until skin turned deeply golden and crackled with each bite. Served hot on platters lined with paper napkins, They disappeared within minutes of hitting the table. The seasoning varied by household, with some families adding garlic powder, others preferring paprika for color. Children claimed wings as their territory, knowing adults would focus on other dishes. Church gatherings featured massive platters of wings, with cooks competing over whose seasoning achieved perfect balance. These wings represented pure Southern tradition before commercialization, proving simple preparation of quality ingredients created food people remembered. Sweet potato bites topped with mini marshmallows were dessert-like appetizers that blurred the line between side dish and treat, their orange flesh and white topping creating visual appeal that drew children like magnets before dinner was served. Mothers would bake sweet potatoes until soft, then scoop out the flesh and mash it with butter, brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla extract until smooth and creamy. The sweetened sweet potato mixture was spooned into mini muffin tins or shaped into small balls and placed on baking sheets, each one topped with a single mini marshmallow that would toast golden brown. As they baked, the marshmallows puffed up and turned golden, creating that characteristic toasted flavor that children associated with campfires and summer fun. In the 1970s Black households, these bites represented creativity, taking traditional candied yams and reimagining them as finger foods children could grab. Molasses popcorn balls combined two Southern staples into Christmas treats that children could help create. Popcorn was popped in large batches, then molasses, sugar, and butter were boiled together until the mixture reached hardball stage. The hot syrup was poured over popcorn and stirred quickly before buttered hands shaped the mixture into balls while still warm enough to mold. Speed mattered. Wait too long and the candy hardened before shaping was complete. The finished balls were wrapped in waxed paper, their bumpy surfaces shining with molasses glaze. Black families made popcorn balls because both ingredients were cheap and the process was forgiving enough for children to participate. The balls appeared on Christmas tables and in stockings, their size and shape satisfying in ways that individual candies couldn't match. Molasses popcorn balls represented family candy making at its most accessible, the kind of treat that created memories through shared labor. Molasses taffy was Christmas entertainment disguised as candy, a sticky pulled confection that turned entire African American families into taffy-pulling teams on cold December evenings. The process began with boiling molasses, sugar, and butter until it reached the hardball stage, then pouring the hot mixture onto buttered platters to cool. Once it could be handled, the real fun began. Everyone would butter their hands and start pulling, stretching the dark mass until it lightened in color and developed that signature chewy texture. Children loved the mess, the laughter, and the competition to see who could pull the longest strand. The finished taffy was cut into pieces and wrapped in wax paper, stored in jars for the holiday season. This wasn't just candy, it was family bonding, a Christmas Eve tradition that created memories alongside sweets. Molasses taffy represented the old ways of doing things, when entertainment came from working together rather than watching screens. Chocolate-covered cherries required the patience to dip each fruit individually, the process turning simple maraschino cherries into elegant confections. The cherries were drained and dried, then dipped in fondant before receiving their chocolate coating that set into glossy shells. Some families used a simpler method, wrapping cherries in softened fondant before dipping, achieving similar results with less precision. The magic happened during storage. The fondant slowly liquefied around the cherry, creating the characteristic syrupy center that burst with the first bite. Black families made chocolate-covered cherries for Christmas because they looked expensive while costing little, the transformation of cheap cherries into impressive candy, demonstrating kitchen alchemy. The candies were packed into boxes as gifts, each piece nestled in paper cups that caught any leaking syrup. Chocolate-covered cherries proved that homemade could rival store-bought when skill and patience combined. Cream cheese and olive pinwheels, made with softened cream cheese mixed with chopped green olives and rolled in tortillas, created tangy, savory bites. Children found intriguing. Aunties would soften cream cheese and mix it with finely chopped green olives, pimentos, and sometimes a touch of garlic powder, spreading the mixture evenly on flour tortillas. The tortillas were rolled tightly, wrapped in plastic, and refrigerated for hours to firm up before being sliced into colorful pinwheels. Each slice revealed swirls of white cream cheese dotted with green olive pieces, creating visual appeal that drew children's attention. In 1970s, Black households, these pinwheels represented creative entertaining, showing how simple ingredients could become elegant appetizers. Children loved them because they were fun to look at, easy to eat, and introduced them to olives in a creamy format that made the vegetables more approachable and less intimidating than eating them whole. Souse meat slices showcased preservation art, sustaining African American families through lean times and celebrating abundance during holidays. Preparation involved boiling pig's feet, ears, and snouts until tender, then chopping meat and suspending it in natural gelatin, seasoned with vinegar, hot peppers, and spices. The mixture was poured into molds and chilled until firm, then sliced thin for platters. Texture was unlike anything else. Cool, slightly chewy meat bound by savory jelly melting on the tongue. Families made souse days before Christmas, allowing flavors to develop fully. The dish required skill to balance vinegar's tang against meat's richness, with every household having different preferences. Elders ate souse with reverence, remembering when it represented survival rather than celebration. Younger generations often needed encouragement to try it, but those who did discovered flavors connecting them to ancestors. Souse reminded everyone that nothing worth having comes without patience, and heritage deserves preservation. Sweet rice with cinnamon and butter was one of the simplest warm treats children ate on cold December mornings, long before the noise of the day began. Leftover rice from the night before was reheated with butter, sugar, and a sprinkle of cinnamon until it turned into something soft, creamy, and comforting. Grandmothers made it without thinking, scooping ingredients by instinct and serving it in bowls that steamed against the cold windows. It filled bellies quickly and tasted like kindness. Kids loved it because it felt like dessert for breakfast. Adults appreciated it because it used what they already had. Sweet rice was more than food. It was a memory of slow mornings, of quiet starts, of families gathering around the table before the rush of school, work, and holiday errands. The taste took you back instantly. Fried Spam with eggs became breakfast solution when bacon was too expensive and families needed protein to start long days of work and school right. Spam was sliced thick and fried until the edges caramelized and crisped while the center stayed tender, creating textural contrasts that made the processed meat more interesting and actually delicious. Eggs were fried in the same pan, picking up the salty, meaty flavors from the Spam's rendered fat for perfect combination. Together, they created breakfast that provided sustained energy and cost less than 50 cents to feed 4 people every morning. In the 1970s, Spam represented wartime ingenuity that continued helping families stretch food budgets long after rationing ended throughout the country. The canned meat didn't require refrigeration and lasted indefinitely, making it perfect for households with unreliable power or limited storage space available. Fried Spam with eggs represented pragmatism over pretension, showing that feeding your family mattered more than impressing anyone with fancy ingredients or sophisticated cooking techniques. Sweet potato pie with brown sugar meringue crowned holiday tables with a beauty that matched its flavor. Smooth, mashed sweet potatoes blended with warm spices created a filling as rich as any custard, poured into a flaky handmade crust. The crowning touch was a cloud of meringue whipped with brown sugar until caramel-scented peaks formed and browned lightly in the oven. Families saved the first slice for honored guests or elders, a sign of respect and affection. The pie carried the sweetness of the southern soil and the skill of generations who knew how to stretch simple ingredients into celebration. Children licked the mixing bowls clean while parents watched the meringue rise, a shared moment of anticipation before the feast. Over time, commercial pies and instant mixes dulled the tradition, but those who remember the warm aroma of brown sugar meringue know that this dessert is more than food. It is a memory of family love, patient hands, and the quiet pride of homemade beauty. Sweet corn and onion skillet was the kind of dish that came together quickly, made from what the garden and pantry had to offer. Fresh ears of corn, or sometimes canned when the season had passed, were sliced from the cob and tossed into a hot pan with sliced onions. Lard or bacon fat did the work of bringing flavor, sizzling until the onions browned and the corn caramelized. The smell was sweet and smoky, filling the house with a promise of comfort even before the first bite. It was cheap, it was fast, and it was nourishing, the kind of supper that stretched across countless families trying to make ends meet. My grandmother served it with bread or cornbread, letting the skillet's juices soak into every bite. The simplicity was its strength, just vegetables and fat, transformed into something more than the sum of its parts. Sweet corn and onion skillet reminded everyone that even with little, you could still eat well. Peanut butter fudge required no chocolate. The smooth spread transformed into candy that cut into perfect squares and melted on the tongue. Sugar and milk boiled together until soft ball stage. Then peanut butter and vanilla were beaten through until the mixture thickened enough to pour into buttered pans. The fudge set firm but not hard, yielding to teeth with creamy resistance before dissolving into sweetness. Some families added marshmallow creme for lighter texture. Others kept it dense and pure, letting the peanut butter flavor dominate. The candy was easier than traditional fudge, more forgiving of temperature variations that would ruin chocolate versions. Black grandmothers made peanut butter fudge when time was short, but homemade candy was expected, the recipe reliable enough for even inexperienced cooks. Cut into squares and arranged on plates, it looked as impressive as fancier confections while requiring half the effort. Peanut butter fudge democratized candy making, bringing success within reach of anyone. Crab cakes formed into mini patties were seafood luxury that made Thanksgiving feel extra special. The sweet crab meat mixed with breadcrumbs and seasonings before being pan-fried until golden. Grandmothers would pick through cans of crab meat to remove any shell pieces, then gently fold the delicate meat with beaten eggs, breadcrumbs, mayonnaise, mustard, Old Bay seasoning, and sometimes diced bell peppers. The mixture was formed into small patties, each one handled carefully, then refrigerated briefly to help them hold together during cooking. The crab cakes were pan-fried in butter until golden brown on both sides, the exterior developing a crispy crust while the interior stayed moist and packed with sweet crab flavor. In the 1970s, Black households, crab cakes represented coastal sophistication, bringing seafood traditions to holiday tables and elevating the appetizer spread. Children loved mini crab cakes because they felt fancy, tasted sweet rather than fishy, and came in sizes perfect for young appetites. Fried green tomatoes served as Christmas appetizers when late-season gardens yielded unripe fruit needing use before frost. Firm green tomatoes were sliced, dipped in buttermilk, then dredged in seasoned cornmeal before frying until golden. The tomatoes inside stayed firm with tangy brightness cutting through the rich cornmeal crust. Families served them hot on platters with remoulade or comeback sauce for dipping. The preparation required attention. Oil temperature maintained precisely, tomatoes not too ripe or they'd fall apart. Grandmothers who mastered fried green tomatoes passed techniques to daughters and granddaughters. The appetizer represented waste-nothing philosophy, finding celebration in produce otherwise discarded. Children discovered they loved the tangy, crispy bites, even when claiming to dislike tomatoes. Fried green tomatoes connected Christmas tables to gardens, honoring the land sustaining families. Hummingbird cake was the southern favorite that fluttered into holiday potlucks and never stayed on the table for long. Made with bananas, pineapple, pecans, and warm spices, this cake was moist, fragrant, and layered with cream cheese frosting that made it impossible to resist. Every bite tasted like a blend of tropical sweetness and traditional comfort, a combination that felt lively and joyful during family gatherings. The cake looked unassuming, but its flavor made people close their eyes for a moment. Families passed around slices on small plates while swapping stories, laughing loudly, and trying to get a second serving before it disappeared. Hummingbird cake brought the spirit of celebration into every room it entered. Cornmeal mush with butter and syrup started countless mornings as hot cereal that cost pennies and filled stomachs before school or work began. Cornmeal was slowly stirred into boiling water with salt until it thickened into smooth porridge, requiring constant stirring to prevent lumps from ruining texture. The finished mush was served hot in bowls with butter melting into pools on top and cane syrup or molasses drizzled over for sweetness that made mornings bearable. This provided sustained energy from whole grain cornmeal that kept children focused through morning classes without hunger distracting them. Leftover mush was poured into pans, chilled until solid, then sliced and fried the next morning for completely different textures. In the 1970s, cornmeal bags cost less than $1 and lasted for weeks of breakfasts, making it economically essential for large families. Cornmeal mush represented resourcefulness meeting practicality, showing how basic ingredients could provide real nourishment that sustained entire generations through hardship. Hand-pulled taffy candy brought winter nights alive with laughter and sticky hands. Families boiled sorghum or cane syrup with sugar until it reached the perfect glossy stage, then poured the hot mixture onto buttered slabs to cool slightly. Children and adults alike greased their palms and began the rhythmic pulling, stretching the warm candy until it turned light and airy. The kitchen filled with the sweet smell of caramel as ropes of taffy were twisted and cut into bite-sized pieces. It was as much about the gathering as the candy, a shared activity that warmed cold evenings and strengthened family ties. Neighbors might stop by to help, turning the process into a spontaneous party where stories and jokes flowed as freely as the sugary strands. Store-bought sweets eventually replaced the long, careful ritual, but the memory of shining taffy and joyful pulling remains vivid for those who once stood in the glow of a winter stove and felt the magic of homemade candy. Chicken wing stew was one of those meals that would surprise modern ears, since wings were once the cheapest part of the bird. My grandmother bought them in bulk when she could, piling them into pots with onions, celery, and carrots. Slowly simmered, the wings gave up their fat and flavor, turning thin broth into rich gravy. She thickened it with flour or cornstarch, serving it hot over rice or bread to stretch it even further. It was messy eating, but no one complained because the taste was so comforting. Wings may be prized today, but in the 1960s they were scraps, turned into nourishment by clever hands. She said every part of the bird had value if you treated it with respect. Chicken wing stew carried the spirit of thrift, transforming what others dismissed into something that filled the house with warmth. It was proof that good cooking did not depend on wealth, only patience and care. Homemade fudge squares were the holiday treat that brought everyone into the kitchen whether they planned to help or not. The stovetop pot simmered with cocoa, butter, sugar, and milk, thickening slowly until Grandma declared it ready. She poured it into a buttered pan and let it cool just enough to slice. Kids begged for the corner pieces. Adults pretended they were waiting politely. The fudge was rich, dense, and sweet in a way that tasted like winter itself. Families gathered around the counter, licking spoons, laughing, and stealing pieces when they thought no one was looking. Homemade fudge turned cold nights warm, and the whole process felt like a family ritual that needed no instructions, just participation. The anticipation alone was part of the flavor, stretching from the moment the pot started bubbling to the moment the first bite melted on the tongue. That fudge held the noise of the season, the stories, the inside jokes, and the familiar chaos of everyone crowding around one tiny pan. Ambrosia was the fruit salad that African American families served at Christmas when fresh fruit was a rare and precious luxury in the winter South. This wasn't the heavy, mayonnaise-laden version that came later. Traditional ambrosia was simply fresh oranges, shredded coconut, and perhaps a sprinkle of sugar, layered in glass bowls that showed off its beauty. Black families would wait for Christmas oranges to arrive, peeling them carefully and removing every bit of white pith. Fresh coconut was grated by hand, the white shreds mixing with the bright citrus like snowflakes on sunshine. Some added maraschino cherries for color or pineapple for sweetness, but purists insisted on keeping it simple. Ambrosia was served cold, often in the family's best crystal bowl, positioned among the heavier desserts. The name meant food of the gods, and for families who rarely saw fresh fruit in December, it truly was divine. Ambrosia was celebration in a bowl, a reminder that the freshest ingredients needed nothing more than each other. Anise hard candy carried the distinctive licorice flavor that older generations loved and children often pushed aside in confusion. Sugar cooked to hard crack stage received anise oil, the mixture poured into molds or onto greased slabs where it hardened into glossy drops. The flavor was intense and polarizing. Some couldn't get enough while others rejected it entirely. Black grandmothers made anise candy for Christmas because it reminded them of their own grandmothers, the particular flavor connecting generations across decades. The candy was believed to settle stomachs and freshen breath, making it both treat and medicine. Elders kept anise drops in pockets and purses, reaching for them after rich meals. The candy appeared in mixed holiday tins alongside fruit drops and peppermints, its dark flavor providing contrast. Anise hard candy represented acquired taste and family tradition, each piece carrying memories. Pigs in blankets made with cocktail franks wrapped in crescent roll dough emerged from ovens as perfect little packages that children ate by the handful, their small size making them perfect for young appetites and hands that grabbed multiple pieces at once. Mothers would unroll refrigerated crescent dough, separating it along the perforations before cutting each triangle in half to create smaller pieces that wrapped around cocktail-sized hot dogs snugly. The wrapped franks were arranged on baking sheets with the dough seam facing down, sometimes brushed with melted butter or beaten egg for extra golden color. As they baked, the dough puffed up and turned flaky and golden, while the franks inside steamed and stayed juicy, creating combinations of textures that made every bite satisfying. In the 1970s, Black households, pigs in blankets represented quick, crowd-pleasing appetizers. Children loved them because they were perfectly sized for little hands. Country ham biscuits anchored African-American Christmas appetizer, spreads with perfect balance of salty, smoky meat and tender, buttery bread. Paper-thin slices of cured country ham were tucked into small biscuits fresh from the oven, sometimes with butter or mustard, creating bites delivering intense flavor in compact form. The ham itself was precious, cured for months in smokehouses and sliced carefully to stretch across many servings. Families who raised their own hogs took pride in serving ham they had cured themselves, while others purchased from local farmers maintaining traditional methods. The biscuits had to be made small, sized for 2 bites at most, ensuring guests could sample without filling up before main meals. Church gatherings featured trays of ham biscuits passed by hand, with recipes for both ham curing and biscuit making guarded as treasures. The combination represented Southern hospitality at its finest, offering guests something homemade, flavorful, and prepared with obvious care and skill. Molasses crinkle cookies were the spice treats shaped by elders who carried Depression-era habits into every holiday season. Molasses had been a staple in their childhood kitchens, affordable and dependable, and even decades later they trusted it more than any store-bought sweetener. These cookies came together with ginger, cinnamon, and cloves, rolled into small balls and dipped in sugar before baking. As they heated in the oven, they puffed and cracked, forming those beautiful crinkles that made them look like they had aged right along with the traditions that kept them alive. The scent alone could make a whole house pause in its busyness. Kids drifted toward the kitchen without being called. Adults made jokes about saving room for dessert, even as they reached for one early. The cookies were chewy in the center, crisp around the edges, and full of deep, warm flavor that tasted like winter nights spent near heaters and crowded dining tables. They were not fancy, but they were dependable, familiar, and tied to a generation that learned to create comfort from what they had. And that is exactly why these cookies made holidays unforgettable. Smothered cabbage with smoked turkey became side dishes so good they often overshadowed main courses, transforming humble vegetables into something truly special and crave-worthy. Cabbage was shredded and slowly cooked with smoked turkey wings, onions, garlic, and chicken broth, until tender and infused with smoky richness throughout. The long cooking broke down the cabbage's natural sugars, creating sweetness that balanced the smoked meat's saltiness perfectly every time. This dish provided vegetables and protein together, making it nutritionally complete and economically brilliant for tight budgets. turkey wings were affordable cuts that delivered maximum flavor from minimal meat, with bones adding depth to cooking liquid. In the 1970s, cabbage heads cost pennies and could feed 8 people when cooked with turkey wings as seasoning. The dish improved with reheating, actually tasting better the next day when flavors had fully melded into cohesive whole. Children who claimed to hate vegetables would eat this cabbage without complaint, won over by smoky, savory flavors. Pork fatback and cabbage was a skillet dish that showed how even scraps of pork could bring life to vegetables. Fatback, mostly fat with little meat, rendered down in a hot pan until it sizzled, releasing flavor into the cabbage. My grandmother would slice the cabbage thin and cook it until tender, soaking up the richness from the fat. The result was savory, smoky, and filling, even though it was made from ingredients most considered cheap or undesirable. Families paired it with cornbread or rice, stretching it further into a full supper. It was food that came from thrift, but it carried a taste that lingered long after the plates were cleared. Blackberry wine cake was the Christmas dessert that let African American families incorporate homemade fruit wine into holiday celebrations. The cake batter was moistened with blackberry wine instead of milk, giving it a deep purple tint and subtle fruit flavor that set it apart from ordinary cakes. Black families often made their own wine from summer berries, saving bottles specifically for Christmas baking. The alcohol baked out, leaving behind concentrated berry essence that perfumed kitchens for hours. The cake was dense and rich, typically baked in a bundt or tube pan and glazed with a mixture of powdered sugar and more wine. Some families soaked the finished cake in additional wine, creating a dessert that improved over several days as the flavors melded. Blackberry wine cake connected summer harvests to winter celebrations, honoring the tradition of preserving and stretching what the land provided into something worth celebrating. Potato candy fooled everyone who tasted it, the humble mashed potato base invisible beneath layers of peanut butter and powdered sugar that rolled into spirals. The recipe emerged from Depression-era necessity, when Black families discovered that leftover mashed potatoes could stretch precious sugar into candy that satisfied sweet cravings. A small amount of potato was mashed smooth, then powdered sugar was worked in cup by cup until the mixture became pliable dough that could be rolled flat. Peanut butter spread across the surface before the whole thing was rolled like a jelly roll, chilled until firm, and sliced into pinwheels that revealed the spiral pattern within. The potato disappeared completely, leaving only creamy sweetness that no one could identify without being told. Grandmothers made this candy because it used ingredients already on hand, requiring no special trip to the store. Potato candy appeared on Christmas platters beside fancier confections, its humble origins hidden beneath its elegant presentation. Stuffed celery with cream cheese and pimento created colorful boats that children picked up by their crunchy handles, the creamy filling contrasting perfectly with the crisp, fresh vegetable that provided texture amidst holiday indulgence. Mothers would wash and trim celery stalks, cutting them into 3-inch lengths before drying them thoroughly and arranging them on serving platters like little canoes. The filling was made by beating cream cheese until fluffy, then folding in diced pimentos, mayonnaise, and seasonings like garlic powder, onion powder, and black pepper. The cream cheese mixture was spread generously into each celery groove, mounded slightly and sometimes garnished with paprika, chopped olives, or crispy bacon. In Black households during the 1970s, stuffed celery represented an attempt to include something fresh among heavier holiday offerings. Children loved them because the cream cheese provided richness while celery added refreshing crunch. Smoked fish spread carried coastal African American community flavors to Christmas celebrations far from any shoreline. Smoked mullet, mackerel, or whiting was flaked carefully, then blended with cream cheese, lemon juice, hot sauce, and minced celery and onion. The mixture was chilled until firm, served surrounded by crackers or vegetables for dipping. Smokiness mingled with bright lemon acid and pepper heat, creating layers developing with each bite. Families near coasts smoked their own fish, while those inland relied on specialty markets or mail order from relatives maintaining water connections. The spread represented African American migration experience, carrying food traditions from places of origin to new homes across the country. Children learned to distinguish quality smoked fish by texture and flavor depth, education serving them throughout their lives. The tradition reminded families that no matter how far they traveled, the tastes of home could follow them anywhere they went. Butterscotch pudding made from scratch was the stovetop dessert that made children gather with spoons in hand long before it had finished cooling. Butter, brown sugar, and milk simmered into a warm, golden mixture, thickened slowly until it became velvety and smooth. Grandmothers stirred with rhythmic patience, never rushing the process. When the pudding was poured into bowls, steam rose into the cold winter air like a warm invitation. Each spoonful tasted rich, buttery, and nostalgic, reminding families that the best desserts often came from humble ingredients transformed with care. Chitlins with hot sauce represented both celebration food and survival food, the ultimate nose-to-tail eating that wasted nothing from the hog. Pork intestines required hours of meticulous cleaning and preparation before being slowly boiled with onions, garlic, bay leaves, and vinegar until tender enough to eat. The process was labor-intensive, and the smell was unmistakable, filling entire city blocks and announcing that someone was cooking chitlins with pride. Despite the strong aroma, properly prepared chitlins had unique flavor and texture that devotees genuinely loved, especially with hot sauce and vinegar cutting through richness. They were traditionally served during holidays and special occasions, particularly around New Year's, connecting directly to slavery survival strategies. In the 1970s, chitlins remained affordable protein that fed large gatherings without breaking limited budgets for celebration. The preparation was often communal activity, with women gathering to clean and cook together while sharing stories. Chitlins represented cultural continuity, proving that even foods born from oppression could become sources of pride. Chitlin's holiday feast once marked winter celebrations with an aroma as unforgettable as the labor required to prepare it. Hog intestines were cleaned thoroughly, then simmered for hours with onions, vinegar, and spices until tender. The dish demanded patience and community, often bringing families together for a full day of washing and cooking. Served with hot sauce and cornbread, chitlins carried the history of using every part of the animal, a practice born of necessity during slavery and carried forward as a mark of resilience. Despite the strong scent that filled kitchens and neighborhoods, the feast represented abundance and pride, especially during Christmas and New Year gatherings. Elders spoke of the old days while younger generations learned the careful methods required to make the dish safe and flavorful. In many places, health concerns and changing tastes have pushed chitlins aside, but the tradition still holds a powerful place in memory as a symbol of perseverance and celebration. Fried bream with hush puppies was a meal born from rivers, ponds, and hands that knew how to fish. Bream, small and plentiful, cost little more than the time spent catching them. My grandmother cleaned the fish, rolled them in cornmeal, and fried them crisp in hot oil until the skin crackled golden brown. Hush puppies bubbled alongside, little cornmeal fritters that were cheap to mix and cooked quickly. Together, they made a dinner that felt rich without draining a wallet. Families gathered around plates piled high, dipping hush puppies into hot sauce or eating them plain while the fish cooled. The taste was pure Southern tradition, simple, salty, and tied to the land and water. In the 1960s, when grocery stores were expensive, fishing poles and cast nets provided meals for families who had little to spare. Fried bream with hush puppies was more than food. It was a reminder of resourcefulness and community, where the catch of the day fed everyone at the table. Fried bologna sandwiches elevated the cheapest lunch meat into something children actually requested, especially when the edges curled up, creating crispy cups filled with mustard and tangy pickles. Thick slices of bologna were scored around the edges and fried in skillets until the center puffed up and the edges crisped and caramelized perfectly. The meat was placed on white bread with yellow mustard and sweet pickle slices, creating sandwiches that were simple but satisfying in ways that transcended their humble ingredients completely. The frying transformed the bologna's texture and intensified its flavor, making it genuinely more delicious than the cold version ever could be. Mothers packed these for school lunches, and children ate them without complaint or embarrassment about their simple nature or low cost. In the 1970s, bologna was among the cheapest proteins available, affordable enough that even struggling families could buy it regularly for quick meals. Fried bologna sandwiches represented treats rather than poverty, showing that simple pleasures didn't require expensive ingredients. Homemade crackling bread filled kitchens with the savory perfume of pork fat and toasted cornmeal. Families saved every scrap of rendered pork skin, frying it until crisp and then folding the cracklings into cornbread batter rich with buttermilk and a touch of lard. Baked in a well-seasoned skillet, the bread emerged with a crisp crust and pockets of salty crunch that delighted children and elders alike. It was a dish born of necessity, ensuring nothing from the hog went to waste, but it also became a treat that people looked forward to at Sunday dinners. Neighbors often traded cracklings after a hog killing, turning the preparation into a social event that celebrated thrift and flavor. Today, store-bought cornbread mixes rarely capture the depth or texture of the old-style cracklin' bread, and few families still render their own pork. For those who have tasted it, the memory of that smoky, savory slice remains a reminder of community resourcefulness and the joy of making something extraordinary from humble ingredients. Sweet potato biscuits with ham combined two Southern staples into appetizer bites, capturing holiday flavors. Mashed sweet potatoes were worked into biscuit dough, creating tender, slightly sweet bread with distinctive orange color. Baked until golden and split while warm, these biscuits cradled thin slices of country ham whose saltiness balanced potato sweetness. Families made biscuits small for appetizer portions, knowing the combination was rich enough that a few bites satisfied. The preparation honored sweet potato traditions stretching back to African foodways while celebrating Southern ham-curing heritage. Church gatherings featured these regularly, with cooks earning praise for achieving perfect texture. The biscuits could be made ahead and reheated, practical for busy holiday kitchens. Sweet potato biscuits with ham proved that innovation within tradition created foods both familiar and exciting. Caramel cake with pour-over icing was the holiday showstopper that demanded respect from everyone in the kitchen, even the ones who never baked a thing. The cake itself was soft and buttery, but it was the caramel icing that turned it into something legendary. Grandma would stand over the stovetop, stirring sugar and butter until it thickened into a glossy golden river. She knew if she rushed it, the whole thing would seize. She knew if she stirred too slow, it would burn. Patience was the secret ingredient. When the icing reached the right point, she poured it over the warm cake in one slow, steady motion, letting it run down the sides like silk, no fiddling, no second chances. Once it set, the icing cracked slightly when sliced, revealing the tender cake beneath. Every slice was a celebration of effort, of tradition, of hands that knew exactly what they were doing. Caramel cake tasted like the holidays growing up. Sweet, deep, bold, and worth every minute it took. Cheese wafers made with sharp cheddar and butter created crispy, salty crackers that children munched by the handful, their homemade quality far superior to anything store-bought could offer. Grandmothers would cream softened butter with finely shredded sharp cheddar cheese, then gradually add flour, salt, and cayenne pepper until the mixture formed a stiff dough. The dough was rolled into logs, wrapped in wax paper, and chilled until firm, then sliced into thin rounds and baked until golden brown and crispy. As they baked, the cheese melted into the butter and flour, creating crackers that were rich, savory, and addictively crunchy with just a hint of heat from the cayenne. In 1970s, Black households, cheese wafers represented Southern tradition and hospitality, recipes that had been passed down through generations. Children loved cheese wafers because they tasted like cheesy potato chips but felt more sophisticated since they were homemade. Butter mints melted on the tongue in seconds, their creamy sweetness disappearing almost before the mint flavor registered. The candy was made by cooking butter, sugar, and cream together, then adding peppermint oil and pouring into molds or dropping onto waxed paper. The finished mints were pale, almost white, with a texture somewhere between fondant and fudge. Black families made butter mints for Christmas because they looked elegant, tasted refined, and required no special equipment beyond a good pot and steady attention. Churches served them at holiday receptions, the tiny candies passed on silver trays alongside coffee and punch. Women competed quietly over whose mints were smoothest, whose flavor was most balanced. The candy represented hospitality distilled into bite-sized form, each mint a small gift offered to guests. Buttermints appeared at weddings and funerals too, but Christmas was their true season, their cool sweetness cutting through the richness of heavier holiday foods. Coconut candy was the simple Christmas confection that African American families made when fresh coconut was available and patience was plentiful. Sugar and water were cooked to soft ball stage, then freshly grated coconut was stirred in until the mixture became thick enough to drop by spoonfuls onto wax paper. The candies set into sweet, chewy mounds that tasted like tropical sunshine in the middle of December. Some families tinted portions pink or green for Christmas color, while others left them snowy white. The key was using fresh coconut rather than the dried, sweetened kind from bags. The natural moisture created a texture that packaged coconut couldn't match. Coconut candy was often made alongside other Christmas confections, the grated coconut pulling double duty for cakes and candies alike. Children loved these simple sweets because they were allowed to help drop the spoonfuls. Coconut candy was proof that two ingredients could create something worth remembering all year long. Fried okra rounds served with ranch dressing were crispy, crunchy appetizers that introduced children to vegetables in ways that made them forget they were eating something healthy, the golden coating making every bite feel like a treat. Mothers would slice fresh okra into thick rounds, coating them first in buttermilk that helped breading adhere, then dredging them in seasoned cornmeal mixed with flour, salt, pepper, and garlic powder. The okra rounds were dropped into hot oil where they bubbled and crisped, the cornmeal coating turning golden brown while the okra inside stayed tender. Once drained on paper towels and sprinkled with extra salt while still hot, the okra was piled into serving bowls and placed near small dishes of ranch dressing that children dunked them into with enthusiasm. In Black households during the 1970s, fried okra represented Southern tradition meeting holiday hospitality. Children loved fried okra because it felt like eating fried chicken in vegetable form. Chocolate fudge made from scratch demanded precision that separated accomplished candy makers from hopefuls, the temperamental confection requiring exact temperatures and patient beating. Sugar, milk, butter, and cocoa simmered together while grandmothers watched thermometers or tested drops in cold water, knowing that a few degrees meant the difference between creamy perfection and grainy failure. Once the mixture reached soft ball stage, it was removed from heat and beaten vigorously until it lost its gloss and thickened enough to pour. The fudge set in buttered pans, cut into squares that revealed dense, smooth interiors. Black families made fudge for Christmas because it represented skill. Store-bought couldn't compare to homemade, and everyone knew the difference. Tins of fudge appeared as gifts, each square a testament to the maker's patience and knowledge. Children learned by watching, understanding that fudge making was earned through failed batches and practiced technique. The candy connected Christmas to kitchen mastery. Deviled ham spread turned leftover Christmas ham into appetizers, stretching holiday abundance across days of family visiting. Cooks ground or finely chopped cooked ham, blending with mayonnaise, mustard, pickle relish, and hot sauce until reaching perfect spreading consistency. The mixture was packed into crocks, ready to spread on crackers whenever guests arrived unexpectedly. The term deviled referred to spice and mustard, giving the spread its distinctive kick, transforming plain ham into something with personality. Families appreciated how spread made a little ham go far, feeding dozens from what might otherwise be a single sandwich. Children loved helping grind ham through hand-cranked meat grinders, turning handles while adults added seasonings. The spread kept for days, improving as flavors melded together. This appetizer represented the African American philosophy of abundance through creativity, making sure no guest left hungry and no food went to waste during the most important gathering season of the entire year. Red velvet cake with cream cheese frosting was the kind of celebratory dessert that appeared on Christmas tables like royalty making a grand entrance. Its deep red color was dramatic, bold, and instantly recognizable. Grandma mixed the batter with a focus usually reserved for important tasks. The cocoa powder gave it depth, the vinegar made it tender, and the thick cream cheese frosting tied everything together in a tangy sweetness that felt like a hug. In African American homes, red velvet was not just a cake, it was a statement. It meant company was coming. It meant something special was happening. It meant the year had been long, but joy still had a seat at the table. Sweet potato biscuits once brought warmth to breakfast tables and Sunday dinners alike. Mashed sweet potatoes blended with flour, butter, and a touch of sugar created a dough that baked into soft, slightly sweet rounds. These biscuits paired beautifully with salty country ham or a drizzle of sorghum syrup, offering a perfect balance of savory and sweet. Families often baked them in batches large enough to feed relatives and neighbors, turning an ordinary morning into a quiet feast. The natural sweetness of the potatoes gave the biscuits a gentle orange hue, a visual comfort as well as a culinary one. Children were often given the task of mashing the cooked potatoes, a small role that made them proud participants in a beloved family recipe. Today, store-bought rolls and instant mixes have replaced the slow, careful preparation of true sweet potato biscuits. For those who remember their fragrance filling the kitchen, each bite carries memories of kinship, generosity, and a heritage that deserves to be cherished. Stewed chicken backs were one of those meals that turned scraps into sustenance. In the 1960s, the back of the chicken was considered the cheapest cut, with little meat clinging to the bones. My grandmother bought them in bulk, cleaned them, and simmered them for hours with onions, potatoes, and carrots until the broth grew rich and fragrant. The long cooking softened the bits of meat so they slid easily from the bones, creating a meal that was both filling and flavorful. Families served the stew over rice or with cornbread, stretching the broth even further. The dish carried smoky undertones if she added a ham bone or a splash of fatback, but it was nourishing even without extras. What made it memorable was how something so overlooked could still feel satisfying and dignified at the table. Stewed chicken backs reminded families that nothing should be wasted, and even the smallest scraps could anchor a full dinner. It was a meal of patience, thrift, and creativity, proof that the cheapest part of the bird could still feed a household with warmth and pride. Persimmon pudding was the forgotten Christmas dessert that African American families made when wild persimmons ripened after the first frost. The fruit had to be perfectly soft. Picked too early and the astringent tannins would pucker mouths and ruin the pudding entirely. Families gathered the orange fruits from wild trees, mashing them into pulp that became the base for a dense spiced pudding. Mixed with eggs, sugar, buttermilk, and warm spices, the batter baked into something between cake and custard, with a texture that was almost fudgy. The flavor was unique, sweet but earthy, with hints of dates and cinnamon that no other fruit could replicate. Persimmon pudding was served warm with whipped cream or hard sauce, though some families ate it cold for breakfast. The pudding represented foraging traditions, the knowledge of when and where to find wild fruit. Persimmon pudding connected African American families to the land and seasons in ways that store-bought desserts never could. Divinity required dry weather and a steady hand, the meringue-based candy so temperamental that Southern grandmothers refused to attempt it when rain threatened. Sugar syrup boiled to hardball stage was poured in a thin stream into beaten egg whites. The mixture whipped until it lost its gloss and held peaks that could be dropped onto waxed paper. Pecans folded through added richness, each piece studded with nuts providing crunch against the melt-away sweetness. The candy was pure white, cloud-like in texture, dissolving on the tongue into nothing but sugar and memory. Black families made divinity for Christmas because it represented mastery. Anyone could melt chocolate, but divinity demanded skill. Tins of divinity appeared at church gatherings and holiday parties, each piece swirled into peaks that caught the light. The candy connected generations of women who learned the technique by watching, understanding that some knowledge could only be passed through demonstration rather than written recipe. Deviled eggs with paprika and pickle relish were the appetizer children fought over at every Thanksgiving gathering, their bright yellow centers dotted with red paprika creating tiny works of art. Grandmothers would boil dozens of eggs the night before, peeling them while warm and slicing lengthwise before scooping yolks into mixing bowls. The yolks were mashed with mayonnaise, yellow mustard, sweet pickle relish, and vinegar until perfectly creamy, then spooned back into egg white halves. Paprika sprinkled on top added color and smokiness. In Black households during the 1970s, deviled eggs symbolized celebration, appearing at every gathering from church dinners to reunions. Children would hover near the kitchen, waiting to sneak one before dinner, knowing that once adults arrived, these treats would disappear. The combination of creamy richness, tangy pickle brightness, and paprika's heat satisfied everyone. Liver pudding rounds brought distinctive Carolina and Virginia flavors to African-American Christmas appetizer spreads. This specialty combined pork liver with cornmeal, spices, and sometimes rice, cooked until thick enough to slice, then fried until edges crisped and centers stayed creamy. Served on crackers or toast rounds, the pudding offered rich, iron-forward flavor pairing perfectly with sharp mustard or pepper jelly. Families purchased liver pudding from local butchers following regional traditions, or prepared their own using recipes passed through generations. The dish represented nose-to-tail philosophy that African-American cooks perfected from necessity, but continued from appreciation. Children often resisted initially, but adults insisted they try at least one bite. Knowing acquired tastes became lifelong favorites. Fried rounds disappeared quickly from platters, with guests returning for seconds. Liver pudding connected Christmas to everyday survival foods, elevating humble ingredients through skilled preparation. Persimmon pudding was the dense winter dessert that appeared only when the strange orange fruit finally ripened enough to use. In many African-American homes, someone always knew which neighbor had a tree or where to find persimmons at the market right after the first frost. Once the fruit was soft enough to mash, elders would turn it into a thick batter flavored with spices, sugar, and a little butter. It baked into a dark, fragrant pudding, somewhere between a cake and a custard, rich enough to stand alone, but even better with a drizzle of cream. The texture was smooth, comforting, and unmistakably tied to the season. Families appreciated it because persimmons did not come year-round. They were special. They marked the moment when winter holidays were truly beginning. Eating persimmon pudding felt like honoring tradition, like respecting the rhythm of the land and the patience required to wait for fruit that ripened in its own time, and that timing made every slice feel like a celebration. Red beans and rice became Monday tradition, using Sunday's leftover ham bone to create entirely new meals that cost almost nothing but fed families for days. Dried red beans were soaked overnight, then simmered all day with the ham bone, onions, celery, bell peppers, and Creole seasonings until creamy and thick. The long cooking broke down the beans' starches, creating natural gravy that coated white rice perfectly while providing complete protein. Mothers could start the pot in the morning and let it simmer while doing laundry, making it perfectly practical for busy days filled with household responsibilities. The dish improved with time, tasting even better the second day when flavors had fully melded together completely. In the 1970s, dried beans cost pennies and lasted months in pantries, making them reliable staples for tight budgets. Red beans and rice showed how yesterday's scraps became today's sustenance, with nothing wasted and everyone fed satisfyingly. Rice and molasses supper was one of the simplest meals, but also one of the most remembered. A pot of rice was inexpensive, filling, and always on hand, but paired with a drizzle of molasses, it turned into something sweet and sustaining. Sugar was too costly for everyday use, but molasses was affordable and sold in larger tins that seemed to last forever. Families poured it over steaming bowls of rice, letting the dark syrup seep into the grains until they gleamed. The taste was rich, almost smoky, with just enough sweetness to make children smile. It was often eaten at the end of the day when no meat could be spared, and it carried people through the night with enough strength to face the next morning. My grandmother told me rice and molasses was a treat disguised as necessity, proof that resourcefulness could soften the edge of scarcity. In the 1960s, when Black families were stretching every dollar, rice and molasses kept hunger at bay while still offering a touch of comfort. Simple, cheap, and unforgettable, it was a meal born of need but remembered with love. Buttermilk cornbread baked in cast iron anchored countless suppers with its golden crust and tangy bite. The heavy skillet, seasoned from years of use, gave the bread a flavor impossible to match in a modern pan. Families stirred cornmeal with fresh buttermilk, a little lard, and a pinch of salt, then listened for the satisfying hiss as the batter hit hot iron. The result was a loaf both crisp at the edges and tender inside, perfect for soaking up potlikker from simmered greens or for eating plain with a drizzle of cane syrup. Grandmothers often taught their grandchildren to test the heat of the skillet by flicking in a few drops of water, a small ritual that connected generations. On Sundays after church, the scent of baking cornbread drifted through neighborhoods, promising a meal that united family and friends. Today, prepackaged mixes and quick breads have replaced the slow, careful method that once defined African American kitchens, and the art of true cast-iron cornbread grows rarer with each passing year. Lemon icebox pie was the cold and creamy refreshment that families looked forward to during holiday gatherings, especially after heavy plates piled high with rich food. It chilled overnight in the refrigerator, the filling made from lemon juice, sweetened milk, and sometimes a touch of grated peel for brightness. The crust was usually crushed crackers or cookies pressed into place by hand, holding that pale yellow filling like a promise. Grandmothers loved this pie because it required no baking and always turned out smooth, soft, and perfectly tart. Kids loved it because it was like eating sunshine in the middle of winter. When the pie was sliced, it held its shape just long enough to reach the plate before melting slightly at the edges, inviting you to take that first cool bite. It tasted like lightness, like relief, like the moment in the holiday when everyone finally relaxed. Lemon icebox pie was quiet but powerful, a dessert that needed no decoration to shine. Chicken liver pâté spread on crackers created rich, smooth bites that adventurous children tried, the creamy texture and distinctive flavor introducing them to foods that felt grown-up and sophisticated. Aunties would sauté chicken livers with onions and butter until cooked through but still slightly pink inside, then blend them with cream cheese, spices, and sometimes brandy or sherry until smooth. The pâté was chilled in molds or ramekins, then unmolded onto serving platters surrounded by crackers and garnished with chopped parsley or capers. The texture was silky smooth while the flavor was rich and slightly metallic in that characteristic liver way that some loved and others found challenging. In Black households during the 1970s, chicken liver pâté represented culinary sophistication, recipes borrowed from French cuisine and adapted to Southern ingredients. Children who tried it felt brave and grown up, stepping outside their comfort zones to taste foods their parents enjoyed at special gatherings. Pralines were the Christmas candy that connected African American families to New Orleans traditions, a creamy pecan confection that spread through Black communities across the South. Made from brown sugar, butter, cream, and whole pecans, pralines required careful attention to temperature and timing to achieve their signature texture. Creamy, yet firm, sweet, yet deeply caramelized. Black families made pralines in large batches during weeks before Christmas, storing them in tins for gift-giving and visitors. The process was social, with women gathering in kitchens to stir, test, and drop the candy onto buttered marble or wax paper. Children learned to judge readiness by the way the mixture fell from a spoon, forming soft mounds that set into perfect circles. Each family had their own ratio of pecans to sugar, some preferring more nuts, others favoring creamier candy. Pralines were given to teachers, mail carriers, and church members as tokens. This candy carried culture and community in every bite. Panouche brought brown sugar richness to the fudge family, its maple-like flavor distinguishing it from chocolate versions that dominated most candy platters. Brown sugar, milk, and butter cooked together created a base darker and more complex than white sugar could achieve, the molasses notes emerging as the candy set. Like traditional fudge, panouche required beating until the mixture lost its gloss, then pouring quickly before it seized in the pot. The finished candy was tan-colored and creamy, sometimes studded with pecans that added crunch to the smooth sweetness. Black families in regions where maple was scarce used panoche to achieve similar flavors using ingredients already in the pantry. The candy appeared on Christmas platters as the sophisticated cousin of chocolate fudge, appealing to adults who appreciated its complexity. Panoche required the same skills as chocolate fudge but offered different rewards, proving that mastery in candy making opened doors to endless variations. Sausage balls made with breakfast sausage, cheese, and biscuit mix, baked into savory spheres that children popped into their mouths like candy, their crispy exteriors giving way to soft, cheesy, slightly spicy interiors. Mothers would combine raw breakfast sausage with shredded sharp cheddar cheese and dry biscuit mix, kneading everything together until well combined. The mixture was then rolled into balls about an inch in diameter, arranged on baking sheets with space between them, and baked until golden brown. As they baked, the fat from the sausage rendered while the cheese melted, creating savory, flavorful bites that were crispy outside and tender inside. In the 1970s, Black households, sausage balls represented easy entertaining, a recipe that could be made ahead. Children loved sausage balls because they were perfectly portioned, required no utensils, and delivered breakfast flavors in snackable form. Bourbon balls were the no-bake Christmas treat that let African American families indulge in a little grown-up sweetness during the holidays. These rich confections combined crushed vanilla wafers with cocoa, powdered sugar, corn syrup, and generous splashes of bourbon, rolled into small spheres and coated with more powdered sugar. The bourbon wasn't cooked out, giving each ball a warm, spirited bite that adults savored after Christmas dinner. Black families often made bourbon balls in assembly line fashion, with some crushing cookies, others mixing, and still others rolling and coating. The candies improved over time, mellowing as the bourbon infused every crumb, making them perfect for preparing weeks ahead. They were stored in tins between layers of wax paper, hidden from children too young for the whiskey but drawn to the chocolate coating. Bourbon balls appeared at holiday card parties and New Year's Eve gatherings. This candy was sophisticated yet simple, proving elegance didn't require an oven. Which lost dish will you bring back to your family's Christmas table? Share your 1970s holiday memories in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe so you never miss another celebration of the soul food traditions we almost forgot.